remember. Remember the sky. Remember the sky you were born under. Know each of the stars' stories. Remember the moon. Know who she is. Remember the sun's birth at dawn. The sun's birth at dawn is the strongest point of time. Remember sundown and the giving away tonight. Remember your birth. Remember your birth. Your birth. How your mother struggled to give you form and breath. You are evidence of her life and her mother's and hers and hers and hers. Remember your father. He is your life also. Remember the earth. Oh, the earth whose skin we are. Red earth, black earth, white earth, yellow earth, brown earth. We are earth. Oh, remember the plants, the trees, and the animal life, who all have their tribes and their families and their histories too. Talk to them. Listen to them. They are alive poems. Remember the wind. Remember her voice. She knows the origin of this universe. Remember you are all people, and all people are you. Remember, you are this universe, and this universe is you. Remember, all is in motion, is growing, is you. Remember that language comes from this. Remember the dance that language is. Remember the dance that life is. Remember the dance that life is. Remember.
May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Well, I feel like I should be prefacing this sermon a bit like Rebecca Morello just prefaced her children's sermon. There were some kind of bummed out folks at 9 about this. It's a big subject, and there aren't really a whole lot of answers to it. It kind of bends your mind a bit. Well, one thing I can at least promise you is that the chances are pretty high that on earth there is no sermon being preached this morning like the one you're about to hear. Some of the people at 9 thought that was a very good thing. Other people maybe thought there should be more. You decide where you fall in this. One thing that I will always remember is the first time I ever visited the Empire State Building. It was 1977, and I was a Boy Scout with my troop on the way to the National Jamboree in Moraine State Park, Pennsylvania. And we were doing a little touring of the East Coast before we got there. And so we got to the Empire State Building. As we all squeezed into the elevator at the bottom of that building, I was proudly showing off the neckerchief slide that I had invented out of a King Kong button around my neck as we made our way up to where King Kong had taken his last stand. And as we got to the observation deck, we all piled out of the elevator and rushed outside to behold the view. And that's really what I will never forget. It was really the first time in my life that I had this immediate taste of the vastness of it all. I mean, there were buildings, skyscrapers, going on for seemingly as far as the eye could see, in miles in every direction. It was overwhelming. In fact, in the midst of that awe and wonder, I also felt the first pang of the kind of existential anxiety we feel in the modern age when we're aware of the vastness of it all and how maybe we're a bit lost in the crowd of it all. It suddenly hit me, with this many people out there, how could God ever be aware of the likes of me? Suddenly I felt very, very, very small and insignificant. Well, since 1977, of course, the context in which that kind of anxiety is set is only magnified. New York City has 1 million more inhabitants than it did in 1977. The Earth, 3 billion more inhabitants since then. And of course, the context in which we even situate the Earth is radically expanded. Just the visible universe, as we know it, is 93 billion light years long. That is 6 trillion times 93 billion miles. It contains literally hundreds of billions of galaxies, each one containing hundreds of billions of stars. And if the recent Kepler data from that Kepler Space Telescope that's looking for planets, if it has anything to do with reality, it would strongly suggest that every one of those planets, or nearly all of them, those stars, have planets around them. So trillions and trillions and trillions of planets. And if even 1 out of 1 million or 1 out of 1 billion of those planets has intelligent life on it, then God's got a lot more souls to worry about than even those of us who populate the earth. It's easy to get a taste of being lost in a giant crowd in our world today. And yet, I don't wear a King Kong button around my neck. I wear a cross, literally at 9 when I'm in my robes, and figuratively at 11 when I'm disrobed. But I do so for a reason. I don't think that I'm trading non-reality for another form of non-reality. For in my whole life long, 49 years, I've never once seen a colossal gorilla like King Kong. But thousands of times, I've experienced what I perceive to be the touch of God. The touch of an awareness that is not only aware of me, but more aware of me than I'm aware of me. And I might just chalk this up to a kind of a private feeling that's just isolated to me, if not where so many people around the world attest to having those same experiences. And not just in the modern world, but for thousands of years, really going back ever since the writing or art was ever created. People were attesting to a deity who was aware of them, who sought to be in relationship with them. A deity is extremely intimately aware. Consider, for instance, the witness of Psalm 139.
O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from far away. You search out my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, O Lord, you know it completely. You hem me in, behind and before, and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is so high that I cannot attain it. Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and settle at the farthest limits of the seas, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light around me become night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is as bright as the day, for darkness is as light to you. For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works that I know very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes beheld my unformed substance. In your book were written all the days that were formed for me, when none of them as yet existed. How weighty to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. I tried to count them. They are more than the sand. I come to the end. I am still with you.
Now there's intimacy. There is profound awareness being attested in this ancient text. How is it that God could be aware of us like that? That's the question today. Well, behind me is a photograph of a human brain cell. It's the kind of cell that's associated with our central nervous system. If you pay attention to some neurologists these days, they would suggest that this whole idea that God could be aware of us is a pious fiction. It's simply part of our brain's wiring, that literally our brains are wired to perceive some sort of awareness of God, that it's just hardwired in our system. And they point to the evolutionary process as underlying their supposition. They speculate that long ago, when our first ancestors were born, those who happened to be born with an attachment to protector figures, say a mother who watches over them, they grew attached to that mother, and that mother literally did protect them, so they survived a bit easier than those who were not attached to their mothers. And so over time, through survival of the fittest, natural selection, those who had attachments were in their brains, wired into their brains towards protector figures, survived. And those protector figures, expanded beyond mothers to fathers and to tribes and tribal leaders and to religious leaders who promised the highest protector figure. So those who had brains that were wired to appreciate that survived a bit better than others. And so because you can trace the evolutionary process, it's just a trick of the mind, an illusion. A comforting one, perhaps, but an illusion nonetheless. Frankly, I find that form of logic a bit absurd. After all, as we found last week, the gene that is responsible for creating our eyes existed clear back in the microbial stage of our evolutionary existence. And the mere fact that it evolved and then privileged sighted creatures over non-sighted that eventually led to us and our eyes that we see does not mean that our sight is an illusion, does it? The fact that our brains are wired for sight hardly suggests that what we're seeing is fiction. We're assembling something of reality that our eyes allow us the mechanism to behold. No, if our brains are wired to perceive God, I suspect that they're wired that way for a reason. They allow us to perceive something of reality. But one thing that science teaches us is that a claim that seems just completely absurd, like that God could be aware of you and I in the vastness of the universe. The claim that seems completely absurd cannot be ruled out simply because of its absurdity. To give you for instance, considering the following three claims, if I were to produce no evidence to support any of the three, which one would you count as the most absurd? Claim number one, that this universe, which we've just observed is 93 billion light years across, contains hundreds of millions, billions of galaxies, containing hundreds of billions of planets, containing hundreds of trillions, well, stars, planets, the whole thing, the whole mess, that it originated as a single speck of energy 14 billion years ago. You can reduce all that into a single speck, no bigger than an atom. Without any evidence to support that, if I made that claim, would you continue to want me as senior minister of Countryside Church, or would you put me in a little kind of wrapped up isolation chamber, right? Consider the second claim, that you and I, that the stuff that makes up our bodies, the only place it comes from is from the belly of stars after being cooked for 200,000 years or more, and then the stars exploded, dispersing the mass that makes up you and I throughout the universe. Without any proof to back up that claim, what would you think again? Or claim number three, that there is a God who is consciously aware of you and I, who seeks relationship with you and me. All three of those claims seem absolutely absurd, and yet we have solid scientific evidence to prove the first two. Now, here's where the sermon gets a bit more challenging. Kind of bummed out a couple people, I think, 9. Okay, so bear with me here. I want to introduce one more absurdity, one more claim that science makes that perhaps tops them all, and yet we have proof. Science now claims that the universe, the mass of the universe, if you could like weigh the whole universe, just put it on a scale, weigh it, okay. All right, that there's actually over three times that mass that's out there that we can't even see, touch, feel, even weigh, actually, that it exists, it's present all throughout the universe, and it doesn't act like any form of matter that we know of. It's completely not there, but there. And the only way that we even know it's there is because it has a very weak effect that can be measured, that acts a bit like mass, even though it's not made of atoms as we know of atoms or mass. Scientists call this dark matter. Now, dark matter is neither dark nor matter. They call it dark because it doesn't emit light and nor does it absorb light. So when it stands against the darkness of the universe, you see right through it. Everything looks dark. And they call it matter because, well, what else can you call something that it exerts? What it does is it exerts gravity like mass, even though there's no mass there. You can actually measure its gravitational effects. Okay, is that starting to cause the synapse to explode yet? Okay, so it would be like if I were to claim that I'm not up here alone, that there's actually 3 invisible men behind me. And there are 3 invisible people behind you too, but only unlike the invisible man, you can't feel or touch this person it doesn't speak or anything, but it's there. And we know that that invisible man is there because of the gravitational effects of that invisible man. Now, of course, any mass in the universe has a gravitational pull. You have a gravitational pull, but it's so small, gravity is so weak that you can't measure that. Nobody can measure that. It takes giant mass before you can measure even a slight amount of gravity. So, for instance, the Earth, the whole mass of the Earth, has a very weak gravity to it. It's enough to keep us on the ground, but we can actually overcome that force simply by jumping, right? If we just had to, could sustain the energy of that jump, we could actually go into orbit if we wanted to, right? So gravity is very weak. It's one of the weakest forces in the universe. And yet when you have huge mass, it's there. Okay, so how do they know that dark matter is there? Well, you see, Einstein once said that gravity has the capability of bending light. If you have a giant mass in the universe and light's going right at it, gravity bends the light around it. That sounds insane, but that's actually certifiably true. And what they found is that they can look at, like, say, a star. Like, say that light is a star. And if we're just looking directly at it, what scientists can notice is that the light bends between the star and us, even though there's nothing in between that could possibly have the kind of mass that would bend that light. So they speculate that's dark matter. In fact, using the Hubble telescope, they've actually created a whole map of the dark matter in the universe. Bear in mind that none of that could be seen, touched, or felt, but there's the dark matter. Now, another way they know about there's dark matter is through someone or something called Mira. Mira is not a person, but a supercomputer that's not too far away from us. It's over near Chicago. And Mira is really about 2,000 huge computers, all daisy-chained together, that are capable of performing 10 quadrillion calculations per second. Now, even running that fast, it's only the third most powerful computer in the world. But it's powerful enough to actually crunch the giant numbers to recreate the universe as we know it inside the computer. And what they did a couple of years ago was they fed all of the known knowledge about the universe, about the physics and all that, into this computer in order to recreate the Big Bang and see how the universe dispersed itself using the known universe. So they fed it all into the computer, and it took several weeks to crunch all those numbers, even at that rate of speed. And what they found was the universe, using the known laws of physics, never created itself after the Big Bang. It didn't have enough gravity to actually pull together stars and galaxies. That it all just kind of went poof, and just was all uniformly distributed throughout the universe. So what they had to do was they had to crank the dial up on gravity. Let it go again. No, it's still no universe. So they cranked it up again. No universe. They kept cranking up this dial, letting it go for several weeks to crunch those numbers until they reached the figure of 84% more gravity in the universe than we know about. And once they hit 84%, the picture that was created of the universe in that supercomputer looked exactly like the picture of the known universe. Talking about freaking your freak. Yeah. And only very recently, then, once they were assured that the number was correct, they let Mira go wild and actually recreate the extent of the known universe within itself so we could see it. And the picture recreated by Mira is this one. If you could look at the entire observable universe at a glance, this is what it would look like. What you are seeing is so vast that even a 20th of that screen would represent about 400 million light years. It's so vast that every single dot of light on there doesn't represent a star, it doesn't represent a galaxy, it represents a whole cluster of galaxies Every single dot. If you zoom in a little bit, and I mean only a little bit, that's what it looks like. That's what our universe looks like. Every single dot of light, a cluster of galaxies. Does that look familiar? Like something you saw before? Oh. The brain cell. On the left, a scale of 400 million light years in a little bit. On the right, the scale of 1,000th of a millimeter. When I behold that resemblance, I don't start, and that resemblance was caused by all this dark matter, this invisible matter that nobody can touch, taste, feel, or smell, and yet we only know it because it exerts an invisible force. I do not start thinking, oh, dark matter must be God, but I do start thinking, that's really absurd. Who would have thunk it? That the whole universe is wired like our brain, and that our brains are wired like the universe. That view on the left affords me a view that goes far beyond that little snippet of New York City I saw back in 1977. Only when I behold that view on the left, I don't feel lost in a crowd. I don't feel small or insignificant. I feel like I've come home. I feel like God is in my mind and my mind is in God somehow. I feel like Rita's poem. The universe is in you, and you are in the universe. You are in God's mind, and God's mind are in you. And I don't know if that works scientifically or not, but I do know it speaks to my life experience. That my life experience over and over and over again suggests to me that I am in God's mind, and God's mind is in me. And so when I look out into the vastness of the universe, I hear the words of Psalm 139 in a little different way than I've ever heard them before.
O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from far away. You search out my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, O Lord, you know it completely. You hem me in, behind and before, and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is so high that I cannot attain it. Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and settle at the farthest limits of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light around me become night, even the darkness is not too dark to you. The night is as bright as the day, for darkness is as light to you. For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are all your works that I know very well. My frame was not hidden from you. When I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth, your eyes beheld my unformed substance. In your book were written all the days that were formed for me, when none of them as yet existed. How weighty to me are your thoughts, O God! How vast is the sum of them! I tried to count them. They are more than the sand. I come to the end. I am still with you.